What's up, River City? It's your boy Zach Fleming, and welcome back to episode chapter 4 of River City Stories, hosted by me, Zach Fleming. Welcome, because this episode is a great one for me. I actually got to sit down with my Aunty Michelle. Love you, Aunty Michelle. Thank you for coming on. Yeah, thank you. Yes. Thanks for coming on. Honestly, though, this was a great conversation. We spoke about East Timor. We spoke about how hard it was for Aunty Michelle to actually leave Australia, married, leave her husband, leave her children here, leave her family, go over to East Timor and do something for other people. She retired when she was X amount old. I think she says 54. So she was semi-retired, was just sitting around, working hard, but really just wanted something fulfilling to do. So what she did, she volunteered with a place called Palms, Australia. You'll hear more about them. And that took her to East Timor, or Timor Leste, and she volunteered over there at Balabo. It was a wonderful experience for her. She had to learn so many languages. I think there was 3, so not so many, but like enough to like, it be a bit hard. It's hard, out here. So she had to learn 3 languages, a little bit of a mix. She details that as well. And just sort of the risks of going over to another country that you don't understand, and what that actually pertains. She also talks about volunteerism versus what it means to volunteer. We have a bit of a chat around that as well. So peep your ears, get ready, because this one is excellent. I can do that better. Keep your ears peeled, because this one is excellent. What? That's probably good. I might use that one. Without further ado, this is Aunty Michelle.
Our time is just beginning.
Get ready!
Get ready? Let us begin.
Our story begins here.
Discover the legends of Brisbane. River City Stories.
Tell your story. Legends never die.
All right, it's time to begin.
It's time to begin.
Our journey begins with your host, Zach Fleming.
You're a storyteller. Yeah, just tell us a story.
Well, thank you for joining me, Aunty Mish. I do appreciate it, taking your time out. I know you're a busy lady today anyway. You've hit semi-retirement, as you called it earlier.
Yes.
Yeah, how are you finding that?
What people always say about retirement is that you're busier than when you were at work. So, but you get to take a slower pace.
Yeah.
It's a much slower pace, which is good, because after my trip to Timor, it's a very, very slow pace, and a very relaxed lifestyle there as well. Like, everything happens in Timor time. So, yeah, it's good to get back and not be in that rushed, mad, always on the go, where you don't think and value, your time with family and friends. So, yeah.
That's good. Do you think your time in Timor plays a little bit more of that appreciation that you got now?
Very much so. Very much so. The values in Timor, the Western influence and Timor culture are very different. So because they don't have a lot of what we don't see as luxuries, but luxuries here, they tend to value a lot of things that we don't, things as simple as food, having 3 meals a day and having takeaways and things like that. Basic things, washing machines, even power. Power used to go off all the time. Connection, we all complain about, NBN coming through, and there'd be days that you wouldn't have any internet connection at all. So it basically cut off from the world. And where I was situated was a remote community, so it was about 10 kilometres from the border of Indonesia. Okay. And up in the mountains. So if I had to go to Delhi, it used to take me 4.5 hours, and pretty traumatic, horrendous drive there, or a 6-hour bus trip there. And that was just to go to the bank if I needed to get cash out to go to the bank. Yeah.
So before we get too far into it, for the listeners, let's paint a bit of a picture as to why you're in Timor. So if we revert back to how long ago have you been back?
I've been back about 6 months
6
now.
months?
Yeah.
And you were there for 2 years?
Yes.
And prior to that, you were working and then you retired and didn't know what to do?
Yeah, so I had worked for a large government organisation for 30 years in community engagement and communications type role. It was pretty stressful. I used to work about 70 to 80 hours a week, and my husband worked as well. So, it was, you wouldn't see each other or get to do a lot of things because you're always tired all the time. And on top of that, I used to do about 12 to 15 hours of volunteer work on top of that as well.
What were you volunteering at the time then?
Various things. So assisting elderly, I'd go in and just clean out their houses, doing small events. Prior to that, I'd organise school fetes, anything really. So when the girls were at school, I was pretty active on that scene there. And then after that, I'd just be involved in, I did the Brisbane Writers Festival and just things that would take my fancy. So after 30 years of tax, I decided to take a voluntary redundancy, and I spent probably, I think it was about a year and a half doing various volunteer work. I started to, I was actually looking for a niche of what would suit me. So I worked with the elderly. I'd worked with abused kids. I, would do food drop-offs, Christmas hampers, etc. But I still, there was still something lacking in my life. So I've always wanted to do international aid. But because of family commitments, finances, etc., it's always been a big dream of mine. So I thought, this is the one time in my life I get to do it. It's either now or never, or else I'll be too old. So I thought, no, I'll do that. So I embarked on looking at a whole range of different organisations, and I really didn't want to get involved in that volunteerism type thing where you're in and out. A lot of the time it can do more damage if you're just there for, a 3 month or 3 week stint or whatever.
Are you talking like they're going to Africa and
the
orphanages for like
a become a bit of a
and then go?
Yeah. It's become a bit of a trend, and often it's how do you say? Often
self-indulgent.
Yeah.
It's to go, hey, look at me.
Yeah.
You're trying to beat around the bush, but that's essentially what you're.
So I was trying to be tactful. So
you're not wrong. It's as you call it. It's sort of become a trend, and with social media, it's hey, look what I'm doing. And
people don't realise that. Those people that go off and build in a community, they're actually taking jobs away from locals there, and. Sometimes, and that's where you've got to be really careful about where you go and really look into what you're doing as well. So, for instance, I knew of one group that had gone in, and after they'd left, and they all felt good about themselves, we're the Western saviours of the world, we've come in to do this for you. And afterwards, the local people there were quite upset because it actually took jobs from people. Okay, so, and a lot of the time people rely on that sort of income because that's what feeds their family. It's as basic as that. It's not so they can get another car or whatever. It basically feeds their family, and it's probably food for them for a year. So I had a really good look. And then also you've got on the other side of that, there was that orphanage, that big debacle with that orphanage where they weren't actually orphans. It was an income-generating scheme for people.
It's not just the one orphanage. Apparently there is a lot of orphanages where they're just getting kids and going, hey, we're an orphanage.
Yep.
Exactly that, to say, oh, come here, spend your money. And as you said, it's an income generator, and you're actually supporting a black market.
Yeah.
Of children in slavery.
Yeah. And also volunteerism doesn't really contribute to self-sustainability of a community as well, because you're just going in. Often it's not enough time to teach people skills of what to do and how to do it type thing. Or what I see, or what I did see in Timor, was large organisations would come in, do their thing, and then not teach people or give people the skills about maintenance and how to fix things. So they'd come back in 6 months, it might be a well and the pump would be broken and no one's using it.
No one knows how to fix it.
No one knows how to fix it. So as well-intentioned that people are,
no pun intended.
It's so I looked around, and it probably took me about 4 months before I came upon a small organisation called Palms Australia, and they've been doing this type of work for at least, it's probably coming on 56 years now. And their whole philosophy is to, it's an exchange of skills, they look at it at. It's to immerse yourself in the culture, which is why 2 years is a good amount of time. And they also work with the local community. So the requests come through from the host community. It doesn't come through from a large, NGO or non-profit organisation here in Australia. It's actually the host community that say, we want to accomplish this, but we need these skills and we need someone to help us gain these skills. So
it's not forced upon. It's actually,
it's a request. They have requested it.
Okay.
And that's what I really liked about it. I also liked the fact that you're immersing yourself in another culture as well. And, they're very they like the 2 years because it takes you 6 months to gain the trust of the local people before you can actually – and you can't just go in and put on your Western lens and then, go in and say, well, this is how it's done, because you've got to understand the culture. You see a lot of people come in and say, no, you have to do it like this, this and that, without having a proper understanding of what the culture is. And in fact, some of the things that they might be telling people to do may be totally against their culture as well. So Timor-Leste, where I was in Balibo. It's a very traditional community. Women are the most marginalised sector there. You have I think it's about 75% of the population is 25 years of age and under.
How many?
25.
No. What's the percentage?
About 75% of the population.
75% is 25 or under.
Yeah. Ooh. But you've got to think back between 75 and 99, they had about a third of their population killed and murdered by the Indonesian Special Forces as well. So, and that is probably why there's not a lot of people, over the age of 40 and above. So, whereas we have an ageing population, theirs is very much a youth population there. So I was really lucky to get Balibo. So I'd requested through Palms Australia, I'd wanted to go to Timor-Leste. Many, many years ago, back in the 80s, I saw an interview with Jose Ramos Horta, and he really impressed me.
Who's that?
So Jose Ramos Horta is a Nobel Peace Prize winner, a laureate. He was the Prime Minister and President of Timor-Leste. Upon the Indonesian invasion, he escaped out of Timor and campaigned for about, so he was exiled and campaigned for about 25 years to get the world to know what was happening in Timor-Leste. So before Interfet came through.
What was happening? Sorry if you don't.
Okay, so Timor-Leste was under Portuguese rule or oppression for about 400 years. They wanted to change. They had asked the Indonesians for some assistance with that. The Indonesians in 1975 invaded Timor. There was a lot of negotiations going on about the oil and gas rights at the time.
Does Timor have oil and gas?
Yeah, you would have seen quite a bit about the maritime boundary issues happening in the news with that. So, the Indonesian special forces came through and basically by force occupied Timor, and that's where the 5 Australian journalists were killed. So they were trying to communicate to the world how Timor was being invaded by the Indonesian forces, and it was because the Timorese were desperate for the world to know what was going on, and it was largely ignored. They were killed on the 16th of October in 1975, but they managed to get some communication. In fact, they'd sent a reel with Jose Ramos Horta, who managed to get it out to the world to show what was going on there. Yeah, so it was pretty... They've had a pretty... it's a pretty black political history with Timor Leste. So, so I was lucky enough to get Balibo. So the local community had requested for an organisational development mentor there to work at the Balibo 5 Community Learning Centre. So Balibo 5 Community Learning Centre, it was the building that the 5 Australian journalists were staying in, and they painted the Australian flag as a symbol of sanctuary in the hope that, they wouldn't be touched by the Indonesian Special Forces. Unfortunately, it offered no sanctuary. So there's a fabulous group of people called the Balibo House Trust, which was established by the Steve Bracks government. He was the longest-serving Victorian Premier. And they're made up of some of the family members of the Balibo 5. Shirley Shackleton is the wife of Greg Shackleton, Greg Cunningham, although he's not on the actual trust, but the son, John Milkins, is on the trust. So they're a really special group of people. The Australia Flag House, they call it, was actually refurbished and then given back to the community as a learning place. So, and their intent, they still operate now, their intent is to make Balibo a more prosperous and healthy community too. So I was lucky enough to be placed in Balibo.
Did you get to choose that, or is it just...
No, they match your skills, your personality with the placement. So you have to be fairly resilient to be able to to be able to cope with being in a remote community as well, because often, like the closest person to me, and they call foreigners Malays, the closest Malay to me was probably an hour away on either side. So you'd be isolated. You don't know the language. If you don't have internet connection, you can't communicate family, etc.
Is Malay like gringo? Is that?
Yeah. It's supposed to be white foreigner, but I'm not white, so
so it's gringo.
So a white person. And
how many Malays are there
in Balibo?
Yeah. Oh, like in Timor from Palms.
When I first arrived there was about 13, and currently I'm not sure. I think there's about 9 or 10 now. Yeah. So they're really careful. They don't just put anyone in the role. Palms Australia is very careful about matching the person to the position. And there's been a few people that have had to go home because they haven't been able to cope with the isolation,
or haven't
as well.
Been accepted in the community as well. Yeah,
haven't been accepted in the community too. It's really important to take off that Western lens and not. They say in the first 6 months you should sit back, observe and build your networks. And that's really important because it gives you an understanding of the community and how they operate. And then it's easier for you to be able to help them achieve the goals that they want to achieve. So that's really, really important. So, so Ballabo, I felt comfortable straight away in Ballabo. Reminded me of Mauritius, the homeland. The rice every day. I just felt it was very much like Mauritius of 30 years ago, still untouched. Just a really none of the modern influences. The average family there has 6 kids, so it's a beautiful, beautiful place. So I was lucky to be placed there at the learning centre. As soon as I got there, instead of sitting back for 6 months, we had a dental clinic being built. We had a community kitchen being built. We had the volunteer accommodation being built. So you're almost on the go while you're there. And the community centre itself had a range of initiatives and programs that we just kept developing because it just kept snowballing. So the first part of the community centre is actually a museum that honours the Ballabo Five, and it also honours the 9 local Ballabo people that were killed by Indonesian soldiers for assisting the freedom fighters, the Fretland people. So that was one part. We also were trying to, which we succeeded, to support women's cooperatives. So for the economic empowerment of women, there's also a lot of widows in the area as well. So they have a local weaving called Tice Weaving. You remember the pillows I gave you with the little tice on the front? So that assists the women in earning and generating some income as well. So we had the little women's co-op shop there. We were running vocational skills training. So there was English classes, computer classes, and also we developed some basic hospitality courses as well. Rotary play a big part. So we also had, with Rotary, we had social welfare initiatives. So there was a schools program, a building program, and also the health program, which was one of the new initiatives as I got there as well. My main role there was to mentor the staff at the centre in being able to run these programs so that they could be more self-sustaining. The end goal is to get the centre to be self-sustaining so they can operate it themselves.
Run by Timor.
Run by locals. And it might take another 5 or 6 years or 10 years, but eventually. And I saw a marked improvement. I call them the staff, and it feels really funny because these people became what I call my Owen Mane and my Owen Feto, which is my sons and daughters. They became my sons and daughters as well. So we're very close there.
Is that Timor? He's
Owen Mane is son and Owen Feto is daughter.
Did you pick up much of the language over there?
Well, I had to.
Yeah.
I had to. If I went down to the shops, I had to. But it's really confusing because they're so close to the Indonesian border. There's a lot of Bahasa which is spoken. So, and a lot of the people there under 30 speak Bahasa because when they went to school under Indonesian occupation, that's what was being taught is Bahasa. Also a bit of Portuguese because they were under Portuguese rule for so long, and also Tetun, which is their official language. But even Tetun itself has many different dialects as well. So, I remember asking the time one day and, I was the answer was in 3 different languages. It was in Portuguese, Bahasa and Tetun. So all your monetary transactions when you go to the shop, you would ask for 2 of something in Tetun and all the monetary transactions would be in Bahasa. So, yeah, you picked up. So I wouldn't say my Teton was great, but I did understand what people were saying. And also part of my role there was to improve the English of people there as well, so that they could work the museum, because we used to run tours of the museum, give a little history of the place, some of the monuments in the area as well. So my role there was also to help improve their English as well. So there was a lot of laughter about my pronunciations on certain things, and when I'd make serious faux pas on certain things as well. So so it was difficult to start with, but as you got in the swing of it, when I left, I felt like I left half my heart there, as well as here. It was really hard to leave. Yeah.
In that first 6 months, as you say, is probably the hardest part, and you're sitting back, you're getting an understanding of the place, you're learning, you're observing, you're taking off your, as you call it, the Western lens. What did you miss the most about home? I mean, you've just left your husband, you've left your 2 daughters. What's going through your head there? Are you feeling like you wanted to go home? Was there any stage that you almost packed up and went, this isn't for me?
I wasn't going to give up, because I kept my eye on the end objective of what I wanted to do. I really missed my husband and my kids. But in saying that, I actually felt our relationship had not improved, but our relationship had changed also. So my daughters, who, how's your day? Good, Mum. And it was now conversations on the phone, half-hour conversations, and them telling me things. So then I'd tell Paul, oh, did you know Angelica did this today? And no, and he's right there. So they opened up a lot to me. So the lines of communication expanded. And with Paul and I, it was like, because we didn't have the humdrum of day-to-day, doing the shopping, doing this, doing that, we actually spoke to each other like we used to when we were dating. So it changed things as well, which was really interesting. I mean, it's not the same as, getting a hug or. No,
but it sounds like you grew deeper in your relationship probably in a way that you didn't expect it to, because hearing that perspective, I always wondered, what's happening there in terms of, I mean, you're so far away, but to hear the fact that you've actually grew closer with your children by not being there, is a very abstract thought.
It did. There was a definite shift in our relationships, in both between my husband and I, and my husband, Paul and I, and the girls and I. There was a definite shift in the relationship there, which was really good. And it was good. They all came to visit at various times, so it was good. I think when Paul came, his mind was at ease, because he could see, he was worried. He could see where I was at, how well I was protected by my Timor kids there, who I knew in the community. So I'll go back to, we have the Ballabo House Trust, but we also have the Ballabo board members, and they're made up of the sub-district administrator, who's the most powerful guy in the sub-district, the Sefi of the Suku, so the village chief, and a few other prominent members. So I got to know them really well. So that was a form of protection for me as well. So I never really felt threatened there at all, having, those people backing you up all the time. No one would dare, because there's a high level of respect there for people in a prominent position, veterans, and for the elderly, but I was considered to be, not elderly, but they call it the Fetick and the Katuas, so they're like the elders, a really high respect for the elders as well. So, so I was pretty well protected with that. So, and I introduced Paul to all these people, the girls to all these people as well. So as I got to know their families, they also got to know my families as well. So it was good.
So you're 6 months in. Where does it shift? Where does it go from? All right, I'm still. You wanted to see it through, obviously, but you're wanting to. You've got these feelings of you might not be there. Did that ever cross your mind?
I did get homesick.
Yep.
There were days, don't get me wrong, there were nights that I'd cry myself to sleep, thinking, what have I done? But like I said, I kept focusing on what I was here to do, and that's what picked me up. The couple of volunteers that were the closest volunteers to me, I had a really good relationship with them as well. So we would support each other, and also my placement officer, Christine, was fantastic. So you would be able to contact her if you had any of these feelings, and a lot of it's expected. They say, it goes up and down during certain times. The first few weeks it's all exciting, etc., and then and you've got to think when you're there, you have to retrain your brain to think in another culture, and that's actually exhausting. And there's a lot of things that can be very confronting that we're not used to. So the first time, I think it was about a month before I got there, there was someone that I knew whose father had died. Now, over there, it's not you go to the funeral, wherever it may be. You have to go to the house, and there's actually a dead body lying there, and you have to go and pay your respects. They'll be maybe on the bed, wrapped up in a blanket, etc. You have to go and pay your respects. And that was really confronting for me, because you walked in and there was a lot of people, and you walked in and they've got the wailing happening and the chanting and the other different cultural things that they do happening. And you have to stand in there. People cry all over you, and, I'm a very tactile person. If someone's crying, I tend to put my arms around them, and you don't do that there. People just cry on you. But in saying that, they're more accepting of death than what we are. They do. And I remember someone saying to me, thank you so much for shedding tears with us, type thing. And, it's all part of being in the community. But this goes on for 3 days. And then when they go to bury the body, it's a big ceremony, and then it's a big procession. Some of the time it's probably between 3 kilometres up the hill to the Santa Cruz, which is the cemetery there. And then they would do what they call is the Lilinanai Funan, so it's the flowers and candles ceremony. And I was honoured because there were certain people of importance in the community would be asked to lay a wreath of flowers on the grave, and I would be asked as a sign of respect as well, which I was really humbled by that as well. So, and to put the candles on, although I almost burnt my hair off the first time, because I'm talking hundreds of candles over this grave here. So it was, that I found confronting. And also I was asked to be a godmother, and my godchild was stillborn, and it was a 3-day paying your respects, but it was, tin roof in the hot sun, wood walls, dirt floors, and a little baby there, and they'd stitched her eyes, and that was really hard for me. I don't think I slept for 3 weeks without having these images of little Apriel all the time. That I found really hard and really confronting. And because I was the nominated godmother, I was expected to stay there. And that was only about 3 months in, and I didn't know the language at all. And people are doing the prayers and the chanting, etc., and everyone's staring at me. And it was just, and there were dogs on the ground and kids playing around the body as well. And that I found very confronting. But, by the end of it, I think I probably went to about 15 or 20. By the end of it, I remember one viewing or one send-off, I was picking up kids to look into the coffin because they were all jumping up and down, and it didn't cross my mind that this is not what we do type thing. You just accept it, part of their culture, and they do that respect and they do that send-off, and yes, they're sad, but they're not, you know how here people will need to go and see a psychologist sometimes or they don't adjust?
Yeah.
They do adjust. They do adjust. And they're very, despite everything that has happened to them, they're really happy people. They take joy in life. They take, you know, families of the most utmost importance, you know, and that was another thing that I found hard to get used to was, you know, if there was a family member in the death, they would take 3 days off because, you know, the women cook for 3 days. They have, you know, the big meal where you might have hundreds of people coming to be fed. They'd slaughter the cows, etc. And it was like, when are we going to get work done? I'm a very task-orientated person, you know. I've done a lot of events coordination and I schedule things, but I learnt that it's just done in Timor time. You know, this is what's important first, is that, you know, that respect and that send-off to family members. So you just...
Not to be so rigid and
yeah.
you broke a few of your...
Yeah, so when I came back here, especially going through the airport, it was a culture shock for me. You know, I got into Darwin Airport and there's all these signs and there's, you know, masses of people everywhere, and then, you know, they do the scan of your eyes and it was like all these machines and, you know, this tap and go thing, and it was just... it's taken me a long time to adjust, and I still don't think I'm fully adjusted either. Just, you know, and I came back for Christmas and just that, you know, the consumerism and greed was really, really hard to take. I locked myself. The first Christmas I came back for 2 weeks. The first Christmas I came back, I only saw family and a few very close friends and kept myself in the house. I couldn't go outdoors. It was really... just seeing the glut of what we have, you know, when you're dealing with malnutrition levels of 70% of kids suffer from malnutrition, you know, really high rates in the 70s as well of maternal and infant mortality there as well. You know, you don't see kids complaining about what they're eating. They eat whatever they can get. Some kids don't get fed unless they go to school because the government supplies, I think it's 20 cents for a meal, and that might be the only meal they get for the day as well. So, you know, going from that and then coming to what we have here, yeah, you learn to appreciate, and I talk about that exchange of skills or exchange of knowledge. You learn to have a better appreciation of what you have and not what you don't have. I think that was a really good thing. I always thought that I wasn't a materialistic person. I always thought, you know, I wasn't greedy. I didn't want this and that. But then I realised that you bring it down to grassroots like that, and, yeah, you are materialistic, you know. So...
I think that's a big thing all throughout the Western civilization is we've grown into a society that consumerism is the normal. I'm reading a book at the moment called Bullshit Jobs.
Yeah.
And it's a theory, and I think it's David Gerber. And pretty much what it says is in the 30s, it was predicted that we would be working 15-hour weeks. It would have flying cars, and we wouldn't be working as long because of technology. But the thing that changed from that theory in the 1930s was consumerism. Now, you want to buy a car, you have to think about 20 different manufacturers. You want to buy a house, there's 100 different builders. you take that down to a finite level and you want to buy a chair for your home. You've got so many options instead of just going, well, there's a phone. Everyone have a phone. Here's the one that you get. It's a company that sells it. So these bullshit jobs, essentially, what it goes through is that there's so many people out there that think to themselves, my job is not actually giving anything to the world. And that's what a bullshit job is.
Yeah.
There's a job in the book where there was a 60-year-old who was collecting his paycheck for 6 years. No one noticed. He wasn't at work. And he just started to study some poet that he really loved and his works of that. It's just amazing how much consumerism does to the world. And going back to your point is you take it back to Timor and somewhere in like that where you have the malnutrition, where you have all these grassroots of they're always the happiest people.
Yeah.
Because they don't have all these things to trick them into wanting more and more and more. It's the value that we love what we have rather than what we don't have, which was your point earlier.
Yeah. And I met, she was a German writer. She wrote for a travel magazine. And she wanted to interview a couple of people, but not the prominent members of the community. She wanted just your normal average person. So we took her out to see a lady who was out in one of the outlying villages. And she asked her, what is important to you? You tell me what is important to you. What would you like to have? And she basically said, the thing that is most important to me, besides God and my family, because you've got 98% of the people there are Catholics and very devout Catholics as well, she said, is having rain. Because if I have rain, my crops will grow. If my crops grow, I have food to feed my family. Simple as that. And this lady was a lovely lady, but she kept trying to get around the question of what would you want, and it was the same answer all the time. You know, it's as basic as that for her. So, yeah, it makes you think, you know, we talk about upgrading our phones or upgrading our cars and whatever, and you've also got to think of the environmental impact on that as well. So we would have part of Rotary's generous donations was donating computers, which we would set out to some of the schools and they wanted to equip all the schools, but when you understand the community, you understand some of these schools don't actually have access to electricity and the teachers don't have the skills for the computers as well. So, and then some of the computers were breaking down and I wanted to send Marino, he volunteered at the centre, one of the locals, off to get some vocational skills training. Very clued on guy into his computers, but he all self-taught through the internet. So he wanted to get to that next level that he could start repairing the computers and they could be put into, you know, some health centres or kindergartens, etc. Rotary said, no, that's fine, we'll bring more computers. We'll give you more computers, which is wonderful and generous, but it was like, well, what are we going to do with the 20 computers there? There is no tip there. There is no recycling there. What do we do with those computers there? If you give someone the knowledge how to fix them, they can be fixed and then put somewhere else, not necessarily the schools, but they can be put somewhere else where they could be of use to the community as well. So
it's that saying, right? What is it? Give a man a fish, he'll eat for a night. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for life.
Yeah, exactly. So we managed to get another wonderful Rotary group, Windsor in New South Wales. They raised funds to send Marino to Yogyakarta, which is in Indonesia, to get his vocational skills training for that. So, and then also donated all the tools and equipment that he needed to fix those computers.
He's almost going to be a pioneer over there, isn't he?
Yeah, well, one of the telecom companies, Timor no, is it? I've forgotten it already. Timor Telecom, Tete, they call it. So our Wi-Fi, our router at the centre had broken, and it took 6.5 months for someone to come out there because they only had 3 people to service all of Timor Leste. And, you know, it might only be 1.4 million people, but you think of the travel of getting, you know, I think Balabo's 136 kilometres, something like that, or 156 kilometres from Dili, but it takes you 4.5 hours to get there because of the conditions of the roads and the perilous mountain trip up there. So, yeah, it's and he now will assist anyone. He's a wonderful person in fixing their computers, their phones, etc. So,
is he getting paid or is he still volunteer?
He does it as a volunteer.
Good man.
Yeah.
Nice man.
Well, his reasoning is, Mum, because they all call me Mum there, Mum, you know, you come here to help our people. Why can't we help our own people? And that was his philosophy.
Interesting philosophy.
Yeah. He's an amazing guy. I
want to go back to you being asked to be a godmother.
Yeah.
At 3 months in, why? And what would have, let's say I wasn't born as a stillborn, what would have been the expectations of you as a godmother back in Australia?
Probably I'm another godmother. So I have a godchild in Timor.
So what's the expectation then?
Well, she will eventually come here to be educated. So I will take that responsibility over. Yeah. So my new godchild is now Olimpiana Marilaka de Carvalho Rankin. That's her name. That's
she
what's
took your
written
last
down.
name?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
So Paul and I are godparents to Olimpiana now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And she will come out probably at the beginning of high school.
What's that, 12, 13?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know now. It's grade 6
Yeah.
now, so I've just lost with all of that. So she is 2.5 years old. So
Are you ever going to go back and
love
visit?
to go back.
Yeah.
So we had
As part of Palms or just by yourself?
well, I'd like to go back, which I can't at the moment, but
Why?
probably money.
Okay, yeah. I wasn't sure if it was like a certain thing where you can't go back through Palms or
Oh,
if it
no.
was a military
I can
coup
go.
over there, or...
No, I can go back any
Okay.
time if I had the funds.
Yeah.
We had started a group of us, the Spend It Well organisation, Rotary, Ballabo House Trust. There was a small community outside. So let me explain. Ballabo is a sub-district and they're divided up into sukus, okay? And in each suku is a aldeas. There's a certain amount of aldeas and they're like little hamlets. So it's villages and hamlets type thing. So there was one called Balola. They had a primary school there and it was razed to the ground by the Indonesians. So when the Indonesians left in 1999, they had the scorched earth operation. So that it was basically, well, you don't want us here, we're taking what's ours, and if not, we're going to destroy it. So they destroyed about 75 to 80% of the infrastructure there, and that included schools as well. So Balola has about 180 kids there that have no access to education. Well, they do, but you're looking at 5-year-olds walking 4 to 6 kilometres in the heat, carrying 5 litres of water because they have to bring water to school because the school doesn't have any access to water if they want to be educated. So there was a lot of work going on. The community there wanted, and this is what I loved about the Ballabo House Trust, they listened to what the community wanted and then used all their connections here to raise the funds to be able to give that to the community. And I'll talk about the dental clinic in a moment. So they have raised funds for the Balola kindergarten preschool there, and a lot of negotiations, and after 6 months, and also you're liaising with Timor government as well, which can be very problematic. The village, the Sefi of the Aldea, so the chief there, the director of schools for the whole municipio as well. So finally all the approval, sourced a local builder to build the thing, and they're having their opening in September. And I would dearly love to go to that opening, but I won't be able to because it's Paul's 50th in October, and we're going to go away for that. So, and that's
Is he 50?
why we can't. Yeah.
Sheesh.
I'm 54.
Really?
Yeah. But the other good thing they did, so liaising with the community again, it was discovered that what the community really wanted was a dental clinic. So this is one of the major projects there. There's only 5 dentists in all of Timor, okay?
5 to service 1.4 million.
Yes, and they're all based in Dili.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, so everything's centralised at the moment. So what's happening is...
So you're trying to get one out in Balibo.
Well, we've got one in Balibo. Yeah. So, and that was the build
I
that
just
was
ruined
happening.
your story, didn't I?
No. That was the build that was happening when I arrived there. So I just hit the ground running when I got there. So there was a lot of fundraising again for that. Only 5 dentists. The overall oral health of people there is impacting on their overall health. They have a really, I don't know if you've ever heard of the betel nut.
Never.
Okay. Betel nut, it's supposed to be hallucinogenic. It's like a nut. It's like a nut they use, and it's used in a lot of traditional ceremonies. And it's the nut, and then they have the betel leaf, and you chew that, and then they do the lime on it, but it just destroys people's teeth. And the lime is quite caustic. It's not like, it's like the white lime. It's quite caustic, and it's causing a lot of cancer in people's throats, destroying teeth. They constantly got red teeth, the red mouth. So the Balibo Dental Clinic was there to provide services as well as implement education and prevention program as well. So when I got there, and I was really happy to be part of this because it was just an amazing thing. So it's not only the build, but it was also, sourcing and recruiting. We got 2 local dental assistants to come and help at the clinic. Australian dentists used to come through and volunteer for a couple of weeks at a time, about 6 times a year that they come over. And the great thing was that they were training the local dental assistants to do, cleans. We started off with cleans. So Sidonia, one of the dental assistants there, she'd only ever done one clean in her life. And every time the dentist would come over, they would train her, because we're talking about self-sustainability. When in the end, probably about 6 months before I was leaving, Sidonia was actually doing cleans from Monday to Wednesdays, and then Thursdays and Fridays we would do the rounds of the schools to teach them education and prevention. And part of that too was also to give the kids toothbrushes and toothpaste, and teach them when to brush their teeth, how to brush their teeth. I remember the very first trial we did was with one of the kindergartens, because they wanted to implement it in with the schools. But once again, you need that local knowledge, because we got to the schools and there's no running water there. So how do they brush their teeth with no running water? So eventually it was decided, the kids will have to go home. Then they can teach their other siblings how to brush their teeth as well. So that was... little things like that you don't think of. And the dentist would come with them when the dentist would be around and check the kids' teeth, for decay. Now, usually they don't pull out kids' teeth because it falls out anyway. They were doing a lot of extractions for little kids, to the point that some of the kids were on the verge of having septicemia because of the decay and just the pain. There was a 3-year-old that had 4 out. There were people coming into the clinic. I remember one poor lady went in because she had pain in one tooth. She ended up getting 14 extractions. So she just puts up with the pain, So
One tooth, 14 extractions.
yeah, but she only felt pain in one tooth.
Yeah.
But the rest were infected, and she didn't, or just put up with the pain, didn't feel the pain, whatever. So there's a dire need for a dental health program there. So the hardest part of all of that was getting the dental clinic registered. That was a nightmare. It took about 16 months to get it.
Is that because it's a health organisation, or is that just registering any company sort of organisation?
Going through the different levels of government, their requirements, because you've got to think it's relatively a new thing for them as well. The dental clinics were attached to hospitals, so they were under the umbrella of the hospitals, whereas this was a standalone.
Is it the first standalone one?
I think they had Borough Pite Clinic, but
That was still in Delhi.
Yeah, but they had dentists there full time. So this one, in the end, Terry Brax, she's the CEO of the Ballabo House Trust, so I've worked with her a lot, and they pulled some strings and their connections and networkings. So in the end, I actually had a meeting with the Prime Minister face to face. He came to the clinic.
You did?
Yeah, we negotiated. I've got photos. I should have shown you the photos. And we negotiated in getting an MOU. So finally we got the dental clinic registered.
An MOU?
Memorandum of Understanding of how the clinic would operate, etc. And a very switched on guy.
What's his name? Don't forget it.
No, it's Dr. Rui, and he used to be he's a doctor himself, and he used to be the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister at that time.
At that time.
Yeah, and very switched on. He would just ask questions. You go, yep. Okay, let me think about this. 2 seconds later, going to make a phone call. Made the phone call. Right, this is what we're going to do. Bang, 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 bang. So, he used to be the Minister of Health, and I think he's gone back to being the Minister of Health now. So, but he was, he was a pretty amazing person to me. Then I got to meet my idol, Jose Ramos Horta. I got to meet him twice. Twice I got to meet him.
What's he doing now?
He's part of the ministry in Timor. And then I also got to meet Xanana Guzmao. So he was also the ex-prime minister, and he just ran for elections and the last lot of elections as well, and very key to he went to The Hague to negotiate the oil and gas treaty but with Australia as well. So, and his ex-wife now, Kirsty Saw Guzmao, she's an Australian, and she does a lot of work for Timor as well with the Alola Foundation. So it's about empowering women in all various areas in health, education, etc. It's a large organisation there that she's established as well. But, yeah, so I got to meet all those people, and I got to meet, it's my little brag session, I got to meet Robert Connolly. So he was the director of the Ballabo 5 film that came out, and he was a lovely, lovely man. He and his daughter, Kitty, came out to Ballabo for a couple of days, and he also did Paper Planes. I don't know if you've ever heard of that film. It's a kids' film, excellent movie, and they organised to have a free screening out in the football oval, and that was a brilliant night. But it was really interesting watching the locals And there's a part because you've got Sam Worthington and Pete Rosenthorn is in there, and there's a part. Pete Rosenthorn is a teacher, and he's basically grabbing everyone's mobile phones before class to put them in the basket or whatever. And I'm laughing. No one else is laughing because the kids don't have mobile phones. So, it's sort of where I was laughing was very different to where
they were laughing.
Yeah. But that was a really good night. And Robert Connolly is a really genuinely nice person. And his daughter and a few others had organised, because it's paper aeroplane competitions, and they'd pre-folded a whole heap of paper aeroplanes and thrown it in the audience. I actually took him to the Bellabo 5 kindergarten. The Trust built this Bellabo 5 kindergarten, and actually took him there where he taught kids how to build paper aeroplanes. See, things we take for granted was, something as simple as that. And the kids loved it, and he brought along books and colouring pencils, etc. for the kids, paper, because that's, a valuable commodity over there is paper as well. So, that was, he was a lovely, lovely man. Very nice guy too.
What was it like to meet your idol in Jose?
Well, the first time I met him, I was pretty cool.
You didn't fangirl him?
No, but then the second time I met him, which was the opening, so he was the first patient of the Bellabo 5 dental clinic. I fangirled. I was, a bit of a mess actually, because they had the big cultura ceremony the night before, plus we were cooking and preparing for the opening ceremony. So I think I got about 2 hours sleep, and he came to visit the volunteer accommodation because it was part of the new build as well. And Rafina, who works at the centre, my Timor daughter, she was getting dressed in my room, and he came up to look at my accommodation. And he said, "Oh, you don't mind if I come in and have a look?" And I said, "Yes, but you can't go in my bedroom." And just left it at that. And then I thought, oh no, what have I said? So, not very,
Did you ever have any scary moments over there? Was there any?
Yeah, because my Timor kids are very protective and told me when I could go, like when it was, they wouldn't tell me you can't go here and there, but they would say, "Oh, Mum, this one might be a bit dangerous."
What would be considered dangerous over there?
Well, I'll tell you. Can I tell you another
Go for
story?
it, yeah.
Okay. So one day I decided to walk down to the shops on my own, the Mercado, which is not far, with my limited tetun. And as I was walking, there was a big procession happening because they were slaughtering pigs. You don't go to the shop and buy meat there. You grow your meat, so to speak. So they had the big procession with the Katuas leading, and the pigs, about 6 guys carrying I don't know how many pigs, and they were going up to the sacred cave to slaughter and do the kultura with that. So I got there to the corner, it was a T intersection, and the Katuas in front, all dressed in traditional clothing, started yelling at me. And I'm thinking, what am I doing wrong? Trying to think, I don't want to upset him. What am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And he's yelling. And then I thought, oh, maybe it's because I'm a female or foreigner and I'm not supposed to see this. So I started walking off, and he went nuts, and there's spittle flying out of his mouth and everything. Anyway, I found out the next day he wasn't telling me off. He was making a proclamation, okay? And the worst thing I could do was walk off while he was in the middle of making this proclamation. So I spoke to the guys at the centre about it and said, look, I really want to make up and I want to learn the culture so I don't make these mistakes again. Said, okay, we'll organise for the Sephi of the Aldea to come and meet with you. So I met up with him, and I was, profusely apologetic about it all on that. Said, I really want to learn more. And he goes, okay, next time we will invite you to one of our cultura. So it was probably 3 weeks later, and he called me, he dropped around and said, we need to go now. It was on a weekend. So I went with him because I didn't want to offend, and we ended up at this house with a whole heap of people, and all the guys are eating betel nut, etc. And it was because one of the family members had fallen into a coma and she was expected to die, and there was a lot of bad blood between family members. So they did this big cultura to get rid of the bad blood, etc. So, but what I didn't realise, because they drink and they take the betel nut, and sometimes in those situations they can go off their head type thing. And they were also doing, you walk through this arch of all the katuas and they'd be chanting, and then they'd slap the head of people that were going through. And then when I got into, and then I had to witness the pig being slaughtered and everything like that. Not that I like seeing that, it was quite horrific. But then when I got to the centre on Monday and I said, the Sephy invited me, and he goes, Mum, you shouldn't have done that. You should have taken someone with you, because sometimes these things can get quite out of hand, like people fight, it can get quite bloodied and violent. And he said, this one wasn't too far away, but if it's far away, then you don't go to it. So that was probably, but I didn't realise at the time that it was wrong. The other time was, and it was really sad because it was towards the end of my stay. So in Ballabo Villa, you have 7 aldeas, and on All Souls Day, they did the big procession up to the cemetery, and there was a riot there, and one of the Katuas died, so one of the elders died, and it was 7 young kids that had... There's a lot of problems brewing within the youth and some of the elders of the community, because the youth aren't given any of the opportunities. A lot of it is family members of the, those prominent in the community, and now the youth are having access to the outside world and seeing what it's like. I think the take-up rate was 25% of the population took up Facebook in 6 months type thing. So they're getting to understand what's going out there in the world, whereas before they were totally shut off for many.
To the fact that
So, and they're seeing that there's some injustice being done to them, because a lot of them will, their families will sacrifice everything for them to get educated, and then they come back and it's just mass unemployment for them there. So there's a bit of unsettlement there. So it ended up that the Katuas they have these groups called ninjas, and they're quite violent gangs that operate. And from Emera, his other part of his family was from Emera, they recruited ninjas from all over Timor to come and cause havoc to the youth that had killed this elderly gentleman. So it ended up, cut a long story short, the whole town got shut down for 3 days, and they brought in the military and a couple of the police from some of the outlying areas. They shut off the fort, the hotel upstairs, and we shut off the community centre as well. No one was out on the street. One of the aldeas, which 2 of the youth were from, they just shut up the whole village and went out into the jungle because they were frightened for their lives. There was quite a few that took their kids into Delhi. Quite a few of the females went off and took their kids into Delhi. It was because they hadn't registered. You got to register protest. Because they hadn't registered protest, police were just instructed on any problems to shoot to kill type thing. So that was pretty frightening, but I was pretty safe where I was. So we have a fenced area. Everyone knew. So everyone looked after me. The police commandant of Ballabo, Ket Marino, gave him updates about what was going on. We had a safe room that we could go to, which was the dental clinic as well. But that was probably the only time I've really been frightened for
Just the
myself.
state of the
Well, it was
country.
really sad because, it was just this little community because we're so isolated. But it was really sad because it was such a, and maybe I lived in little La La Land there, but, it's such a loving community. And you know what? Everyone's related to everyone there because it's, so few. So that was a bit distressing, and just not seeing anyone out on the street was quite, that was really, really sad. And it just put a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth because, it was so close to me going home that this happened. And then I realised, because I think Timor Leste is number 2 on the alert, like caution or something like that. And I think it brought it back to me that, no, there's still pockets of where things could happen. And I know I met a young girl that I met her father, came to pick her up because there'd been violence and shooting in the village that she was actually volunteering into. So that was sad. There's still, there's still a little bit of civil unrest there, which I think could be easily provoked. And that's why there was, even when you had the big political rallies coming through, people have got machetes, but you just got truckloads of about 100 people on the trucks just coming through to do their political rallies and that. But I wasn't even scared then. Although in Dili it got quite a bit violent because one of the dentists that was going back, they had their car rocked until they realised that it was Malay, and then they let them through. And another volunteer that I was friends with, when she was coming out of Dili, they had to evacuate their car because it was being rocks were being thrown at it, so they had to evacuate until the rally had finished. So, there were just a few reminders every now and again that, it's not the peaceful, sleepy little village. There are things. And look, there's high rates of violence against women still there as well, quite accepted as well. So...
What do you mean accepted?
It's just part of the
culture.
Yeah, unfortunately. A bit of a hangover from the Indonesian Special Forces. And
What's the relationship with Indonesia now?
Well, it's really bizarre because in Balibo, they love the Indonesians and they see the Special Forces as quite separate. They see them as Javanese. Well, you've got to think the border of West Timor is only 10 kilometres away. A lot of them have got family members living there or people that have married into there. They see them quite separate to, the Javanese that actually came through for those horrific times. I mean, I spoke to one guy and he said, he witnessed his uncle slowly, arms being cut off, hands, arms, and then head, and it was just fed to the dogs. He was only 27 or 28, and that's some of the stuff that he saw. So it was quite brutal, what happened. And so there's a fantastic group, part of the Veterans Care, Gary and Michael Stone. Michael Stone, they both served in Timor. Michael Stone was one of the chief negotiators for Jose Ramos Horta when he was in power about trying to negotiate between all the warring factions there right at the beginning in the 2006, I think it was. And he's actually had a couple of stories about him on Australian Story too. And they run a program, it's a rehabilitation tour for veterans that have served in Afghanistan, Timor and Papua New Guinea. And it's quite an amazing program. So, because they see Timor as a country of hope, and it's a Timor Awakening tour that they do. And I got to meet a lot of them because they would come through and stay 2 weeks, 2 days in Balibo. And in fact, Gary Stone was a patron of Palms. So he always checked up, how are you going, how. So, and that was quite amazing because you think of them and their PTSD and how much they suffer, and they came through when it was just rubble, fire, just smoke when they came through, and what they see now is quite different. But then I imagine the people that were there at the time, most people have had one family member at least that was killed between 75 and 99. So I was really lucky because they would take me on a leg of their tour, the veterans, and, they'd say, over here we're fighting. So it was like living history and, Bill in Car 4's built this bridge here, and it was really, but they, it was really good. And the last tour I went with, it was with a group of commandos, and all suffering varying degrees of PTSD as well. But Gary does an amazing job with them, and they're based in Brisbane here.
Oh, wow.
Brisbane. Yeah. So if you ever want to have a chat to any of them. And that was good because I was given a commando pin by one of the older commandos that fought in the Vietnam War, so I was pretty chuffed with that. So, but they do absolutely amazing work. And there's a strong tie with Timor because in 99, Interfet came through. So that was Australian base that came through to help the Timorese after the Indonesians. There was still a lot of fighting going on, and Balibo was, because it's so close to the border. Balibo was one of the main areas that they stayed in, and that's why their visit to Balibo is quite important as well. So, and they've got a little memorial plaque thanking the Australian soldiers. So Balibo and Australia have got a really tight relationship. The Australians are loved in Balibo because they, with a lot of the Sparrow Force in World War II, the fort, because there's a big Portuguese fort in Balibo, which is now turned into accommodation, which is generating income and jobs for people of the community. That's through the Balibo House Trust as well. The fort that was actually occupied by the Japanese for a year in World War II. I had no idea how. Timor's so close to Australia. It's like an hour flight from Darwin.
Well, that's what I hear a lot of these days, is that we could be speaking Japanese. Today, if Japan won World War II.
Well, Sparrow Force, there was about 5,000 soldiers there, totally ill-equipped for Timor Leste, and it was the locals that took them underground and helped them and fed them and took care of them. And Australia thought that they were dead because they heard nothing from them. And then you had in 75 the Balibo 5 journalists that got out to the world what was actually happening in Timor. They are forever grateful for the Balibo 5 journalists for what they have done, because they were the only ones that listened to them. And then you had Interfet that came through in 99 as well. And then you have the magnificent work that the Balibo House Trust and Rotary are doing through the Australia Flag House. Even though it's now owned by the community, they sponsor. They're the biggest international sponsors for that community there, and still giving them schools, the dental clinic.
The infrastructure that was destroyed.
Yeah, well, we made the Balibo 5 cafeteria, and with that we use 100% of local products, so it goes straight back into the community. This is one of the initiatives because cooking is my passion. And then also we would source products from women's agricultural cooperatives, and they were ones that were focused on widows in the area, so that had no way of generating income. And we would incorporate that in all our foods, and also we're employing people through there as well. So the centre, when I started, it had 2 employees, and then I think there was about 6 that were there that had jobs there, and then we're looking at another 8 through the cafeterias, temporary, and just equipping them with hospitality, because tourism's the fastest growth sector there, equipping them with the skills for the future, not what's needed there and then. And then we're also looking into a couple of tour guides to take them and give them the run of not only the museum but a couple of the monuments in the area, the caves in the area, the waterfalls, etc. So, we're really looking at generating income streams. The mechanics workshop there, we're looking into tagging onto government programs there to teach people basic mechanic skills. So, bike breaks down there. That's a source of income for a lot of people doing the little taxi service, the bikes. If you haven't got the skill set in the area, you can't use the bike. They can't afford to take it to Dili or Maliana, and even the repair costs, they can't afford that. So teaching people the skills to do that and generating income for the clinic, for the centre itself. So we had our income generation programs, then we had our social welfare activities, everything Rotary used to donate to the schools. I can't tell you how much Rotary donated, chairs, tables, school bags, pencils. Also, there was a lot of clothing that we would distribute out to those less fortunate in the community as well. Then there was the hospital supplies. So that was another thing that we got up and running there. And the best one, which is one of my favourite initiatives, was the wheelchair program. So just providing mobility to people that had no sources of being able to get around, just trapped in their house or lying on the floor day and night type thing, and bringing that. So before I left, I think we'd given out 6 wheelchairs. And it takes about 8 months for them, or probably longer, for them to source the equipment and then pack it into the container and then send it over to Timor, and then to go through all the regulations over there to get it through. So there were, and I'd put in the wish list probably a year beforehand, but in February there was the delivery of hospital beds, simple things like gauze, hand wash, sterilising, forceps, etc. That was being delivered. So that was about a year before. That was about a year when I'd put in the wish list of this, and you talk to the hospital directors and the little health clinics, the midwives, what do you actually need? Things like aprons, simple things like that. So, I still get a bit sad when I see, because you work on things for so long and then you're not there to see the end of the project.
To see the finished product.
Yeah. So I still get a little bit, And look, I'm happy, and there's other volunteers there now, but and that's probably why it's good for you to do that 2-year stint as well, because you do actually see some of the projects come through, but there are a lot of other things that were on the boil before I left as well. We're looking at a water and recycling project with Hobart City Council.
Oh, wow.
There are massive things that were going on. Not only the kindergarten, they were looking at doing a couple of schools, moving through with the schools there, and more with there was the days for girls, so that's the menstruation kits for girls, because education's not seen as too important for females, and they just don't go to school when they menstruate. So that came through, and that was another one that was about a year in the process of working out things, and that came through, and I missed out on that as well. But I got a lot of other good things as well.
You did a lot while you're over there by the sounds of it, and it sounds like you had an extremely, extremely eye-opening experience. You learned a lot. When you came back, I'm just mindful of time now. Before we wrap it up, I just want to know, I know we spoke about when you came back and the culture shock, but 6 months on, where are you? What's next?
What's next for me? Well, I promised myself a 6-month break because I was working 7 days a week there and quite burnt out in the end. Retraining my brain to be back in Australian culture, which I'm still struggling with at times. Getting my house and garden back into shape. I would like to do, I've done a workshop and I'm about to do some basic English tutoring for new refugees. I've put my name down for a couple more volunteer positions, but I would like some paid work for, just 2 to 3 days a week. Now I've got my little Timor grandchild as well, Michelle Kick, so little Michelle. So those two will be coming out to be educated. And I'm still doing a little bit of work for Ballabo as well. So I'm trying to get sponsorship for a young boy who's an avid cyclist and very good at it, but he just doesn't have the funds to compete, and his bike broke down. And I end up donating my own funds to help him get his bike fixed. Also, I've done assisted a couple in getting sponsorship to come here to do education through here. And looking at getting the dental assistant over there to come, another one, to come, and he wants to become a dentist. So looking at that and him running the clinic. So I've still got my hand in a couple of little bits and pieces over there. I'm doing some volunteer work here, but I would like just a little bit of money to put, because I didn't factor that into my retirement, just so that I can put these kids through schooling when they come over.
For the listeners, there might be a few people out there that want to get involved in some way, shape or form. How do they get involved?
Involved in Timor, involved in
Timor. What you just said, getting funds over there, the fundraising, or even with Palms. What's the first step?
Okay, well, they can. There's quite a few organisations doing things through there. There is the Child First Fund. So they bring the kids out here for operations.
Okay.
There is through the Ballabo House Trust. So all these are also tax-deductible organisations. So there's through the Ballabo House Trust that they can go directly to the Ballabo House Trust if they want anything to do with Ballabo. They can always contact me if they wish. And there is a couple of other organisations which I could get them in contact with, like not legit. I shouldn't say that. That's horrible.
No,
I'm being very judgmental. There is funds that really do. You see, it doesn't get absorbed in administration costs. It goes directly there. And Ballabo House Trust is one of them, that it goes directly to the people. These are all volunteers on the Ballabo House Trust, and they work tirelessly to raise funds to build these schools, dental clinics, to help out the hospital. I know the hospital needs a new ambulance. They've got one for the whole area, which is about 20,000 people across miles and miles and miles, or kilometres. So there is a few, but yeah.
Well, it's good to know. Thank you for coming in, sharing your story.
Thank you, Zach.
No, thank you, Aunty Mish. Thank you for bringing across some curry for me to eat as well after this. But more importantly, I can hear from the way that you've described it today. You've taken so much out of it. You've learned a lot about yourself about yourself. You've strengthened your relationship with the people that you love in Australia, and it's really taken its toll on you over there to hear and understanding the consumerism side of it. So I think they're all messages that a lot of people can relate to and understand. But more importantly, I can't wait to see what you're doing next, how your godchildren come over. I'm sure I'll meet them once upon a time. But thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you for having me. I'm very touched that you thought I had a story worthwhile telling.
Well, it's a great story. But on that, I guess I know you got to get out of here, so we'll wrap it up.
Yes.
And that's a wrap.
Thank you very much, Zach.
Thanks, guys. If you made it this far, it just means that you've finished this incredible story. That's my Aunty Mish. Yes, I know, she is fabulous. And if you haven't already, check out chapters 1 through to 3 already. You've got Camp Cullen at 2, 2100 at 1, and you've got a beautiful soul by the name of Rach at 3. As always, please, if you like this, head over to iTunes, give us a rate. I'm not asking for a 5. If you think we deserve a 5, please, obviously give us, but I'm after some feedback. All feedback is great feedback, and I really would love to get on that new and noteworthy section of iTunes. Otherwise, head over to YouTube, leave us a comment, tell me what you like and tell me what you're not. Send us an inbox on the socials, and we can go from there. Thank you very much. As always, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful morning, afternoon, night, day, however you're listening to this. But more importantly, you do you. Love yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup, and I love you. Holla.